And he just looked at me and said, dude, I don't know what to do with you. And he knife handed me and he told me to unf myself. And he said, just quit paying me and quit coming back. He talked to me like a man. So many of us we want to be fed the bullshit and call it caviar. We want to hear what we want to hear, not what we need to hear. And he was that person in my life that at that time that was willing to tell me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. You can read all the books, you can go to all the seminars, you can do the 2 to 3 day camps, you can spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. I see it all the time. But here's what I will always say is that until you're actually serious, until you're actually going to put in the work day in, day out and be consistent with it over the long haul. It's easy to be enthusiastic in the beginning. It's so hard to be of the endurance mindset because that's the crown jewel we all see.
All right, what's up, guys? This is episode 115, Living the Standard with Cole Rodgers, Men to Mastery podcast. Welcome back. I appreciate you guys. Happy New Year. It's been a little while since we got the episode out with Brian Kite. I sincerely apologize for the delay, the inconsistency of the cadence, and I know I've been saying that for a while. It is all with the best interest in mind. There's stuff going on behind the scenes here, and I think we're almost there. One, to really get some things handled so that we're back on track on a very regular cadence. This stuff's important to me, and I hope it's important to you and valuable ultimately to you. That is the mission. So that is happening, and the reason or what's going on behind the scenes is almost complete as well, which is enabling the launch of the one-on-one coaching, as well as group challenges, connections, events, and coaching. So excited about all that stuff. The downside in the delay is unfortunate, but it is what it is, and I hope you'll bear with me here in the new year as all this comes together and comes to fruition. There is some great stuff in the backlog here. Before I get into today's episode, we got one coming up with Mickey Shook of Carry Trainer. Mickey is awesome in terms of not just sort of be your own first responder and self-defense, but situational awareness kind of in all aspects of that in the crazy, volatile world we are in right now. Super important stuff. Mark Silverman is an executive coach. He speaks in particular to sustainable success, right? So sustainable success, something fairly unique. And Mark he had some awesome insights. I look forward to getting that one out to you shortly. And then Brad Ritter, this one also is already in the bank, School of Grit. Brad has some awesome insights as a entrepreneur, husband, father, and graduate of one of the toughest training programs for civilians in the world. And with that as a common theme, so does today's guest. A couple more notes before I jump into that. I just wanted to say, as we kick into the new year here, about this time last year, I believe it was, I did a little bit of a solo episode with a recap of some of my ways to close out the year and launch into, I think that was 2022 that we were launching into, with a debrief for myself and for you guys on 75 Hard. That was a very interesting and enlightening, inspiring, beneficial consistency challenge for myself, and did it along with a couple other accountability partners to really make it more meaningful. That was awesome. That was a great way to close out. That was the end of 2021, launching into 2022. And I shared that with you guys last year. The reason I mentioned it is I'm going to do another similar debrief because I did a second round of 75 Hard in Q4 of 2022 to close out the year, and then decided to launch back into a third round here to kickstart 2023. Obviously, I like it. I enjoy it. I find it beneficial. And so I'm just going to do another cut on that here shortly to share with you guys in case it benefits or inspires any of you guys to do something similar. Last thing, I guess, just as you know, I'm always big on keeping things on the calendar. I think events keep us training, and training keeps us consistent. That's my own sort of accountability mechanism. So that, along with loving to put challenging stuff out there that's scary to lean into, the BHAGs, if you will, I've sort of set my BHAGs here for the next 12 to 16 months or so. I'll share some of those, but really the point is to encourage you to do the same. It's all relative and scalable, whatever that might mean for you. get some stuff on the calendar, make commitments to yourself, sign up for it, tell people about it, get other people on board, make a team, and then get ready. Whatever sort of challenge or crucible that might be it physical, multidimensional, could even be spiritual, silence retreat, all that good stuff. They're just different forms of the same kind of challenge to grow in different domains, different ways. All right. So that said, please do so. I'll share more of mine, probably in that 75 hard AAR. And with that, today's episode, Living the Standard 115 with Cole Rodgers. I mentioned that Cole also is a graduate of one of the toughest civilian training programs here, excuse me, in the US at least, the SEAL Fit Kokoro Crucible, 50 plus hours of mental, emotional, certainly physical, and probably some intuitional and spiritual challenges that go along with that as well. So Cole was a graduate of that, very unique in the sense that not unique in that it was an awakening event for him, but certainly unique in that his swim buddy, his partner through the event, unfortunately secured the event and then literally passed away at Cole's side. And so along with that tragedy and trauma came an awakening for Cole from a spiritual perspective, as a person, as a man, as a husband, in his relationships, in his marriage, in his fatherhood. And he'll talk about this. His friend and partner in that event is still with him to this day. Cole feels and believes in pushing and inspiring him in his mission, in what he's doing personally, and then even more importantly, what he's doing for the transformation of other men. So Cole Rodgers, School of Man, that we'll get into here in just a moment. One of the other things I'll just say before we jump in is that I really appreciate about School of Man is Cole is setting it up to be this is not a quick hit, one and done weekend warrior, and then hopefully it sticks. He is going with kind of like Mark Silverman's sustainable success. So he's got a program set up that takes individuals, forms a group. It really is a school-like process of a multi-year incremental growth for sustaining that change, transformation, and growth. So that is awesome. And what's the one other thing I wanted to say about Cole? I don't know. You're going to see it as we jump in. He is just raw, authentic, transparent in inspiring ways, and his energy is infectious. So hope you love the conversation as much as I did with Cole Rodgers, episode 115, Living the Standard. Let's go. Okay, we're rolling. My pleasure today to welcome Cole Rodgers. Cole is the CEO and founder of School of Man. He likes to say it's an organization that builds real men through raw and real vulnerability in order to crack the code to have it all. Cole, welcome. Looking forward to our conversation.
Man, I'm extremely grateful. That's how I like to start off all podcasts, and just anything I do in life, my friend, is just gratitude. Such a big deal. And I love what you're doing. I love the mission that you stand for. There's not enough of us out there right now. We were talking before the actual podcast, and just through different programs, different men, it is so needed in today's world, let alone our country. So I'm extremely grateful to be here today and share all the raw and real about me. And I'm just one of those guys that I want to leave the world better than I found it, similar to you. And I just do that by leaning into my vulnerability and just talking through the pain, which I've converted into my purpose, but also where I am today and where I'm going and where I can possibly help, brother. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you and for being here and for taking such an approach of honesty and vulnerability. So I know we're going to get into some fun stuff around that. We set it up a little bit off air, but I do want to ask, you got a lot of accolades, a lot of achievements, a lot of stuff going on for you personally that I think led you on the path that you're on and working through School of Man. One of those things I want to make sure I ask you about. I had a conversation with a buddy. We've got some communities in common. Well, I won't mention it by name. I'm sure we'll get into it. But we had this conversation. He says, you may think differently, but I'm not convinced that burpees are a cure-all. So I noticed part of your resume is a 24-hour burpee record. Tell me about burpees. What's up with the 24-hour?
Oh, man. So I'm a sucker for pain. I think I say it all the time. Find your hard, right? It's
Okay.
just as hard if you want to be broke or want to be lazy as it is to lean into like just 24 hours of burpees. And what it really means is more than anything. I'm one of those guys that I put meaning behind everything that I do and everything that I do. And it's not necessarily about the why as it's as much about the who because they're interconnected. I think a lot of people
Sure.
forget about that. I mean, there's the why has been beat to death and talked about, and books have been written about it, but very few talk about the who. It's the who that matters the most in your life. And those burpees, every one of those burpees represented a different person in my life or a collective group in my life. But also, there's three men that are always waging a war inside of all of us. It's our former self, current self, future self, right? And really where my journey started, and School of Man wasn't developed, by the way, and this will get to the discussion around the burpees out of a business plan or seeing another group on Facebook or Instagram. There's 1,000 of them out there right now, just doing their weekend warrior events, etc. Where it really started with me was at SilFit Kokoro. I'm very grateful for my experience, but my teammate, Kirk Deligianis, passed away at my feet. And anybody that knows anything about Kokoro, about Mark Divine, about SilFit, knows that, they do things at a different level and another level when it comes to professionalism, etc. And really what happened within that 72-hour window, if you will, was Kirk and I were hooked at the hip. I mean, and I'm not going to go into all the detail on that. It's very personal to me and it's very personal to my team, my Kokoro team. But that was a domino that was tipped over that I did not anticipate at that time in my life. And that domino was put in place by God. At the time, I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in Christ. I really had a disconnection. I was more on a spiritual journey in and of itself. 5 years prior to that, my wife and I were living that mirage of a marriage that a lot of people live. You know what I mean? And it was easy. People put such a filter on things in today's world. They look at Instagram, they look at TikTok, they look at Facebook, and I call it living just that filtered life, or even the Amazon Prime life. We want to press a button, the box shows up to our door the next day, and then we expect our results to be the same way. And so it was just as hard to have 5 years of doing Adderall behind her back, cocaine, the whole 9 yards, not telling the truth. And then I go on to Kokoro and go through self-discovery mode for myself because I was going to lose it all. And guys like me, very much alpha driven, we're on the unhealthy side, but we can put a mask on with the best of them. And we put on all this body armor throughout all of our lives, and it becomes outdated and really weighs us down. And so that's what Kokoro was, that big representation. And really it meant several things to me. And, it was about liberation. It was about doing something that was going to make me sweat in my boots. It's kind of similar, like if you ever listen to McConaughey's interview about when he was going from the rom-com world to Dallas Buyers Club, there was a 2-year period that McConaughey didn't get any work. And he calls it unbranding, if you will. And in the business that I am in, my core business, I mean, it's full of a bunch of unhealthy alphas, men that buy into the dad pod, but make a ton of money. You check those 3 boxes. If I make money, have a hot wife, or, very good looking girl, and I'm athletic, which a lot of guys in the world that I'm 38 years young feel like that equates to the golf course, then I'm doing pretty good, right? But our relationships are typically shallow and surface driven, if you will. The more we go through life, the more we start becoming more lone wolf, if you will. And that's just where I was. And going through a tremendous amount of therapy and discovering who I am and really understanding what emotional grit and resiliency is, and really figuring out what self-awareness was all about, and getting in tune with my spiritual side of why I was truly created was a big deal in that journey leading up to Kokoro. But a lot of us folk, we mistake movement with progress. And that's just really where I was in my life. I was mistaking movement with progress. And what ended up happening at Kokoro, I was one of 9, really out of 50 that made it to that end, that new starting line. And Kirk was with me. And along the way, I mean, man, we were swim buddies. We're two Smurfs. I'm 5'8", he's 5'8". And we get to know each other because that's what you do, right? Like, you don't know anybody when you show up. It's just kind of like football camp. You don't really know anybody when you show up. But by the end of it, if you are in tune with mind, body, spirit, and you're there for the right reason, meaning you're there to share pain, you're there to grow, you have something bigger pulling you outside of being known for doing a Kokoro or any other hard event that might be out there. There's plenty of ultra runners that are probably running away from something right now instead of running towards something.
Sure.
Right? There's probably a void there. You can kind of take that where you want it. So over the course of 3 days, it was towards the very end. I mean, they secure us. Kirk falls out. His heart gives out. He leaves 2 boys behind and his wife. And you see that in front of your eyes. And I'm 33 at that time, 32, 33 years young. My wife comes running up. They tell her to go back. It's pure chaos. You know, it was just pure chaos. And there's someone in that, and he'll remain nameless, who I just admire and who I work with now in the School of Man. He's like a big brother to me. And little did I know that was where the domino tipped and led me to a different trajectory. Before Kokoro, it was 2 years, and people tell me I had a blown Achilles. I was out for 2 years. I had 2 surgery repairs, a week stint in the hospital due to a staph infection. There was a time that I thought that I was never going to be able to run a mile, let alone do a Kokoro, right? And let alone meet Kirk. These situations, there are no coincidences in our life. And so that domino tip, but what ended up happening was a Christian radio show, podcast show, similar to your show, got a hold of my story in Little Rock, where I'm from, and said, "Hey, would you come on and just tell everything?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll be happy to tell my story for sure. I'd be happy to tell my story." And it was such a liberating experience that I just said, "You know what? I'm going to pull the mask off. I'm going to rip the Band-Aids off the wounds, and I'm just going to tell it in full." Well, the only person that was listening that day was my wife. I mean, there were a lot of people listening, but she was listening. That person that was listening today was my wife, who had never heard it before. She, along with the other listeners, were listening to this whole thing play out in full time, even though we'd been in therapy for a couple of years. So I was addicted to really that self-sabotaging loop, but it was Kirk's passing that really tipped the domino to where I had to start focusing on things that truly mattered, or I was going to truly lose it all. And immediately when I left there, she called, and I knew I was on strike 3 at the end of the day. So it led us back into therapy with JC McDaniel, who's a very close friend of mine now. And having him tell the story would be hilarious. But she's on one end of the couch, I'm on the other. She's crying. I'm right here, head into my hands. And I'm like, here we are again. And he just looked at me and said, "Dude, I don't know what to do with you." And he knife handed me, and he told me to un-F myself. And he said, "Just quit paying me and quit coming back." He talked to me like a man. So many of us want to be fed the bullshit and call it caviar. We want to hear what we want to hear, not what we need to hear. And he was that person in my life that at that time that was willing to tell me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. You can read all the books, you can go to all the seminars, you can do the 2 to 3 day camps, you can spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. I see it all the time. But here's what I will always say is that until you're actually serious, until you're actually going to put in the work day in, day out, and be consistent with it over the long haul. It's easy to be enthusiastic in the beginning. It's so hard to be of the endurance mindset, because that's the crown jewel we all seek. And that's really where I looked around Little Rock after that conversation. And I said, you know what? I've got to find like-minded men, because when you're the best in the room, you got to find a new room. And that's just the truth. When you're the best in the room, you got to find a new room. And I'm not going to go to somebody, or I'm not going to surround myself. It's like you would never go to see a dentist who has jacked up teeth. So why would you go to take advice, coaching, just to be around that person that's going to help you 10x your life, but they're not living the standard. And I'm just I'm just a big believer, and I don't need to be yelled at. I'm a grown man. You don't have to scream at me. You don't have to yell in my ear. I'm a very action-oriented, type of cat. I will be around. I will find who's ever the best, better than me, and I will put them in my life for a specific reason, and vice versa. And that's how Psalm just really got to start, because I looked around in the men's groups in Little Rock. I went and told my story: the chronic masturbation, the cocaine, the Adderall, the self-sabotage, boom, to this Christian men's group. And they just looked at me and went right back into their Bible. And I said, I had some choice words. And I was like, this is what's wrong. This is what's wrong. Now, I'm not going to go and pay 15 grand to go halfway across the country right now. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create my own reality. So I'd own a CrossFit gym, and I still do, because I was training men like me. I said, if I'm this screwed up, there's got to be other men that are perfectly flawed like me. And so Kirk tipped these dominoes for me. And so I started mentoring and coaching one guy. School of Man is built on endurance. It's just like a school: freshman phase, sophomore phase, junior phase, senior phase. It's over a 3-year process to earn what we call our Phoenix, which stands for rebirth. And we hit every single thing, because I just don't believe in, as grateful I am for the Kokoro experience, I just don't believe a man's going to be reborn in 72 hours or 48 hours. He might get a little insight into himself, but trust me, I'm speaking from personal experience. And anyway, so I started mentoring Adam Pratt, and we were just training so differently. The CrossFitters were making fun of me, meditating in the middle of the floor, doing log PT. Basically, what I was doing is what we've been trained to do for thousands upon thousands of years, is cracking the code through the physical to get to the mental, the emotional, the intuitional, and the spiritual, what I had learned from StillFit, but expanding upon it. And that's what I told myself. I was like, I didn't have really any connection or connectivity to my team going into it. It was for me, plain and simple. It was very much an achievement mindset versus a fulfillment mindset, which there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to say that there's anything wrong with that, but I said, that's artificial brotherhood in my book. Brotherhood is a different language in and of itself. And Kirk and I have a different connection spiritually. That's why I still talk about him. He's not dead. He's immortal. That's why I continue in all these podcasts that I bring him up every single day. And that's exactly what I want for myself and anybody I surround myself with. But Psalm started with Adam Pratt, and it just became a grassroots movement. And a collective group of men, myself and 8 others, said, you know what? We're going to be disruptors in this game, but we're going to do it the right way. We're going to take our time. We're going to build curriculum, pathways that help men develop the endurance muscle, no matter what walk of life you're from CEO to entrepreneur to a man that might be working on the construction crew. Doesn't matter, right? If you want to become a better man and you want to focus on just bettering yourself, bettering your marriage, everything that we talk about, and just leaving the world better than you found it, Psalm is the place for you. But it's going to require you to develop the endurance muscle, right? And that's just how it just really got started. Now, through that process, and this is where the burpees come in, I am one of those guys. I do not rest on past victories. I've done it once, and I will never do it again. So many of us are going to talk about what we did. We're going to look at our accolades. We're going to look at the medals. We're going to look at everything and say, man, I remember when. And it would have been really easy as the founder of the organization, to say, you know what? I did Kokoro. I started Psalm. I completed our 55-hour crucible in Psalm, which is a workup. It's a requirement. You don't get to, it's not an open invite type of deal. All right. And I was like, I've done all this. So you know what? I can just kind of sit back and just rest on my past victories and be that CEO that talks about it, but really isn't about it anymore. And that's just not who I am. That's not how I live my life. That's not the code, and that's not the ethos of Psalm that myself and founders created. And so I said, you know what? One thing that we are seeing today is an epidemic of men. We are losing them by the droves. More men are dying in their 30s and 40s. We just don't bury them until they're in their 80s, right? And I'm not just talking about veterans. I'm talking about men that are performing at the highest freaking level. We're wanting the quick hits, the quick fix, the Amazon Prime lifestyle. When we don't get it, we give up. our best years are behind us. I'm too old. All the lies we want to tell ourselves at the end of the day. But I have an infinity because between what Kirk happened, with what happened to Kirk, and Jake Mulder, who took his life, close friend of mine that I lived with when I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, right? It was a call to action to all men to make the call. And I'm doing something that we'll talk about later too, to continue to expand upon that mission too, let alone the who's that are always in my life that I'm fighting for. So I told myself, what I don't talk about is the 8 hours that I did 3,000 burpees in. That was harder than the 24 hours. I've got that record too. I just never, I don't care about the records. I mean, when my publicist was putting all this together, they're like, you got to get the accolades, you got to do all this, that, and the other, you got to do that, the Goggins resume, whatever. That shit doesn't fire me up because I don't need anybody else's validation. But at the same time, the reason why I did it was very personal, meaningful, and spiritual to me. And it was to show men that you have to lock in on a reason to live and not exist. And I did it in November. When was that? It was November 2018 when I told one of my guys in SOM, his class 2 member, Chris Black, I said, I'm going to set the world record for most burpees in 24 hours as a male. And he said, okay. And I'll never forget doing like 500 burpees in my jeans and cowboy boots on Thanksgiving Day, and just kept going and going and going. And so I started training up for it. I think that year I did like 40 to 50,000 burpees or something like that. Can't remember. So I did a test and it was 8 hours of burpees, and I did over 3,000 in 8 hours. And then I did the 24 hours that Memorial Day weekend that May. And it really rallied a cause and really lit, it just really, for me, of course the news channels got a hold of it and all that good stuff. But for me, it was, by the end of it, my daughter, my son, my wife showed up. I had people doing burpees within our community. And that's what it was all about. And it was to pay homage to Kirk, to Jake, to raise awareness around our veterans, because I'm a big patriot, huge patriot. But also to all men to say, hey guys, you have to choose to live and not exist. I'm tired of this bullshit that I'm seeing, right? Like I'm tired of you not being vulnerable. I'm tired of you wearing old body armor around, but I can't live your life for you. If I can do this, you can do this. You know what I mean? Like, if I can do this, you can do this. I'm giving you zero excuses by giving myself zero excuses. Has nothing to do about a world record. Has everything to do about the meaning. Right? So that's kind of the lead up, my man, to, the things that happened before that, the dominoes that tipped over really led to that. But you just don't rest on past victories. You always go back to your white belt, and you always continue to work up towards your black belt every single freaking day. And that's really where the burpees came into play. That's what people like to talk about. It's the process, it's the journey, it's the grind. It's waking up at 3:30 in the morning, which I do Monday through Friday, and waking up and cranking out 300 burpees before I even walk out the door to SOM HQ, right? And it's not talking about it, it's training in the dark so that when the lights turn on, man, it's go time. It is go time. But it's also about the transformation of a former self to current self to future self. I'm a big believer in the chase at the end of the day. So
100%. A lot of stuff in there. Let me ask, just backtracking to Kokoro and, where you said you were in your life at that time. Mm-hmm. So Kokoro was about 5 years ago for you. And you talked about mm-hmm. sort of the 5 years leading up to that. Mm-hmm. At that time, why did you sign up for that type of crucible event? Did you really understand why, and how did that change through the course?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. So it was, if you want to get a radical result, you got to make a radical change. And I'm a big believer in risk. I love risk. And it's one of those deals, like, it's got to make you sweat in your boots. So leading up to Kokoro, I, like a lot of people, you are who you surround yourself with. plain and simple. And I'm built differently. I've always believed I'm built differently. And with that, I looked at, you know, in my life, I'd gotten pretty normalized, because that's what we become. You know, we become what we normalize. And hold on one second. I have to edit this out. But you become what we normalize, right? And so leading up to that, just with the Achilles tear, 2 surgeries, I would literally have, and I started a business, and that's the other thing. At 27, I went from making 120, 130 grand to making 60 grand, to getting married, to making $0, watching my daughter flatline on the table, my wife barely making it through that first pregnancy, having $12,000 of healthcare debt because we were on a high deductible health plan, right? All in the first year of my marriage. Like, we literally ran out of money. One of the biggest things those 5 years leading up to Kokoro that I'll never forget. So I blew my Achilles playing basketball. Love basketball. I'm a competitor. Love basketball. Came off of just a double screen, jump shot, boom. Hit the shot, but blew my Achilles. And I would have my mom drive me around to cold call on businesses. And I would crutch up to their doors, and drop off cookies. I literally laid in bed maybe 3 days before I got back out there. But what that did, you know, I get married, have a child, and I will tell you, man, I was a terrible husband. God knew what he was doing by putting Ashley in my life when I met her in Raleigh during North Carolina. Workaholic. I love work, but also loved Adderall, and I always needed another level. I never was one of those guys that was addicted to downers, and I wouldn't even say that I was an addict or a former addict by any stretch, because I'd come in and out of it. But I picked up Adderall. I mean, it really hit college at the time that I was in college. That's when it made its wave through college, and it was very easy to take an Adderall, cram, and then you, of course, started eating it to party all night. And with that, that's really what was the hidden dark side for me in the early on in my marriage. I mean, I literally got married, brother. We went to Costa Rica. My wife, it was that time of the month, she wouldn't give me oral sex. So I left her in the shower crying her eyes out while I went and got blitzed at the bar. That's how I started off my marriage. No bullshit. The Friday night before our wedding, I got so slammed and we were running the town that I went to see her before. It was like 2 a.m. She bawled her eyes out before we even got married. This was my life. Very, very toxic, but I could always produce. Like, you could always count on Rodgers. You could always count on Rodgers. But I had a growing disdain for myself internally. With my torn Achilles, physically, I was going down. I was such a insecure person that I benchmarked myself on what I saw back in the mirror physically. I was more achievement mindset versus fulfillment mindset, right? My income bottomed out because I started a business. I took a risk, which I'm glad I took the risk. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But there was a time, like with Ava Madison, I literally bought a barbecue magazine here in North Carolina, where I am right now at our beach house, from Lowe's, and I bring it home, and she makes me take it back because I could not afford the $5 barbecue magazine, because we had to buy formula. So I literally took it back to get $5, because we had to drive back across country because I needed the gas money to get to Little Rock. So I just started getting more and more pissed, you know, but my business started growing. Eventually, I had another child 12 months after Ava Madison, who flatlined. All I knew what to do was work, plug myself into my work. That was my emotional outlet, right? Like, some people have emotional hoarding issues. That's where a lot of men like me, that's where we go. That's our refuge. We insulate ourselves. We skip out on ball games, practices, all that shit, and we just bury ourselves in work. It's like eating, right? Stress eating, if you will. And that's just where I was at that time in the first 5 years of my marriage. And I've been married for 11 years now. Sex went dry. Sexless marriage, but money, bank account was going up. As long as I had that under control, went from returning a barbecue magazine and making $500,000, then eventually 7 figures. But all that was a mirage because Ashley was so unhappy. We were just roommates, ships passing in the night. I mean, it got to that point where chronic masturbation became an issue with me, and I didn't even want to pursue my wife. Seriously. And that's where I was, and what's really led me to Kokoro, and really what sent me there was I hired on an intern, and he's still with me today on my team, and he's been through school man now. But I was so addicted to stress, number one, so addicted to email, so addicted to be the first guy to respond, so addicted to deadlines, which deadlines are good, yes, as long as you don't let them take your soul. All of that was me. Anger was my primary emotion. And at the end of the day, if you got my way, I would obliterate you. I would obliterate you. Plain and simple. Tyler comes in. I rip him up to shreds because that's how I was mentored. Sent him along the way. And man, for whatever reason in my office, I just broke down crying. My mind was mush. It was monkey mind. I mean, I was crushing up B12 when I couldn't get Adderall and snorting it on my desk. I mean, that's just the lifestyle I was living. And in my business, that is a very big lifestyle that no one wants to talk about. A lot of infidelity, which I'm so great. I've never been unfaithful to my wife, but a lot of just unhealthy alpha, egocentric men that aren't willing to be truly vulnerable. And I was just tired. I was tired of being tired. I was 32, 33 saying, is this how my life is going to constantly be? Stress induced, just completely, just on a wheel the entire time. So I walked into a Barnes and Noble, always been just a big reader, big learner, big grower, self-improvement, whole 9 yards. I've always been like that, but I'd never trained like I've trained now. And I picked up The Way of the Seal by Mark Divine. And I was like, well, screw it. If these guys can do it, I can do it. And that's always been my mindset. But I started off with box breathing and meditation and journaling. And slowly but surely, that's exactly what I needed. And I still do to this day, every single freaking day. That sent me on a different trajectory. So I go to Unbeatable Mind Academy. It's great. I loved it. It's something new for me as a Little Rock Southern boy. That's a paradigm shift where the majority of my family has always stayed in Central Arkansas to Southern California. But I found a new respect for myself, a different, healthy respect. I started detaching more than anything, detaching from emotion, detaching from achievement, right? Not expecting my wife to reciprocate in bed. And that was a big thing that JC would always hammer at me. Say, hey, look, brother, you're going to have to pursue her like you did day one. But you're going to reciprocate without expecting anything in return. That's a hard thing to do for any of us, no matter what it is, let alone sex, let alone anything in this life, right? Now, keep in mind, I'm not talking about the business, the money side of things, the school of money side of things, which we all want to talk about. And there's a place for that. If my shit isn't together over here, none of that matters. Burn it down, throw a match on it. Doesn't matter the private jets or any of that bullshit that you might see on Instagram or Facebook or any of that stuff that guys want to preach. That's the easy shit to sell. That is the easy shit to sell. Now, when I look at you as a man and I say, all right, brother, we're going to go through a rebirth process and it's going to be painful. It's going to be downright fucking painful. I'm going to rip every fucking mask off that you have, and I'm going to actually require you to man up, not this bullshit that you want to kind of pretend to do. And oh, by the way, it's going to take a few years for this process to take hold. Just kind of call it how I see it. That's something different. That's a harder sell at the end of the day. But that's exactly where I was, because the avoidance of pain always creates more pain, creates 10 times more pain. So I decided to run towards it instead of away from it, into the storm, as they say. And that's just how it got started. And I said, you know what? I'm going to attempt 20X. Never done anything like it, but I'm a team guy, and I am, and I always will be. And so I stacked the deck in my favor, completed 20X. And I said, now it's Kokoro. But I pushed it out for about a year and a half, 2 years. In that time process, things are moving well with me and Ash. I'm starting to get more and more connected with the kids, or so I thought. Here's one thing that I've yet to mention. My greatest addiction was lying to her. So I buy this just worn down dumpster fire of a CrossFit gym, not to make money. Had nothing to do about making money, because if you're in the business of CrossFit, you're not going to be making a killing by any stretch, right? But it was beautiful, 18,000 square feet, had everything that I wanted. Of course, the business partnership was this just dissolving, so it was a perfect opportunity for me. So I bought it, something I'd never really done before. Little did I know I was buying like a sorority fraternity into one, so I had to just deal with the toxicity and get that type of crap out of there and reboot the culture. But I was doing it because I needed a platform to train men like me. And what I was doing is creating my own reality. So I was developing things in my life to require me to be the standard to therapeutically deal with the shit that I was wanting to avoid. And hopefully I'm making sense with that statement. I think a lot of us are so entitled that we're looking for programs like SOM or Modern Day Night or Warrior or SEALFIT or whatever the fuck it might be out there to solve our problems. But you ultimately are responsible for your results. You ultimately are responsible for creating your own realities. Don't get me wrong, those types of environments are going to help. And that's just where I was. And lo and behold, I started getting clients. And lo and behold, I started seeing them transform and me transform at the same time. I would never lie to them, but I was still lying to Ashley. I was dumping so much cash. It was like an incinerator for this gym just to keep payroll going. Right? Learned a lot of business lessons in that regard too. So then Kokoro was on the horizon. Bought that gym in January. Kokoro was that September. And people started seeing me train. It was just at a different level. Remind you, I'm coming off an Achilles tear. Could barely run a mile. Had mental blocks, emotional blocks, working through the emotional swings, getting shit together, getting into therapy, buying into breathing, meditation, journaling. This was my Super Bowl. The marathons did not really interest me. That wasn't hard enough. I wanted to know if I did not cut it, that they were going to kick my ass out. I wanted to sweat my boots. I wanted to sweat my boots. And that's how Kokoro came to be. And then when Kirk died, we passed the PT test together. We passed the MERV test together. All the benchmarks you're supposed to pass, right? We went from 50 to 9 like that overnight. Guys lied on their PT test and telling the guys over at SEALFIT that they were doing 15, 20 pull-ups in 2 minutes, and they did like 3. Right? And I looked around, and that's the thing that I see a lot in today's men's groups in society. And I'm not saying I walk on water, because that is not me. But you can sit there and look real easily at a lot of men who want to talk that talk, but they don't walk that walk. They show up every Thursday to drink coffee, but yet they're not taking care of their diet. They're not sleeping. They're not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. Right? And I saw a lot of that in the beginning parts of Kokoro. Well, that quickly got weeded out to us 9. And then Kirk died, and it tipped that domino, man. It really tipped that domino in the best way possible, and it was the right amount of pain. I could have done 50 Kokoros in a row, and they were not nearly going to be as painful in a beautiful way like what happened in the preceding months and years. It really took me 3 to 4 years in SOM alone to reclaim my marriage and be a intentional father that my children need, and the hero they deserve me to be. It took men in my life that were strategically placed by God, by the universe, for specific reasons that required me to level up. Your network is your net worth at the end of the day, and I don't just mean monetarily.
Right.
I mean, it was a big moment for me when I was in a business function in Nashville, keynote speaker. Someone hands me an Adderall. I throw the Adderall in the trash. That's rebirth. That's what we say in Psalm. That's rebirth. So, man, I could go on and on and on with that. But that intertwined with that are the burpees. Intertwined with that are 8 miles of lunges. I don't ever talk about that. I'm going after the 24-hour Murph record, 20 plus rounds. Been training for that since September of 2020. I mean, there's a lot of things. I just always keep myself young. I'm always doing new things. I'm always requiring my men to do new things. I mean, you got to find your heart and you got to double down on it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, kudos on having a lot of insight at the age, even at your age now, but the age at which you were going into Kokoro. I was just thinking about, there's a beautiful video clip out there. There's a friend of mine, some guys up north who run another similar event, right? Men's discovery, self-development, rebirth. They do an 8-day, British SAS style selection process event. So these guys are called Special Forces Experience. Jeff DePatsy and Jess DePatsy and their team. There's a beautiful video from a couple classes ago. It was a dark class. Nobody finished. The last guy standing was by himself for 24 hours, with the cadre just, on top of him for 24 hours. I think that was day 4 or something like that. And there's this video where they're going, why are you here? And he's spitting something out and they're going, no, bullshit, number 7. Why are you really here? Right. And a lot of times we got to pull those layers down to really understand. And how stuff goes, right? The unpacking after the event that takes months, if not years, to really maybe understand why you were there.
100%. Absolutely.
Let me ask you on the physical side of things, just something you mentioned earlier and what you do with School of Man and the physical being, I said this, these are my words. I don't think you said it this way, but as sort of a buy-in, I think you said for ages, the physical has been sort of the entry point to the other layers of our growth and our self-development. I see guys who, and this is one of the reasons I ask you about the burpees, there are guys who resist the physical. And then there are the other guys that will over-index the physical, right? And want to get stuck there. Yeah. Could you say a little bit about both of those?
Yeah, because we've dealt with both of those in Psalm. So Psalm was very much built not for the masses, if you will. Like it's a we're a very intense coaching organization. And you have to go through our process in order to be even a coach for our classes that come through the process. And so we're dealing with every walk of life. We say it all the time. Every man is built for Psalm, just every man might not be ready for Psalm. And that's just the truth. You do have 2 extremes. You have the extreme that you said that is very passive with their physicality, and or anytime you might just inch the dial up a little bit, they just fold. And that's just the truth. And then you got guys like me that over index the physicality. And that has a lot to do with, it gets me back to my baseline. So, and then these guys over here look at the guys that over index and say they're too intense, they're intimidating. This is not for me. I'll do Orange Theory Fitness or F45 or whatever else is out there. And that's just kind of where they live. But I just want the emotional, Cole. I just want the leadership. I just want the spirituality. I just want the fellowship. I want the Christian-based, discussions. But yet they're still avoiding the one thing that they know will unlock the results that they're seeking, so that they're not on an oxygen tank at 75. Where over here, a lot of guys are using the physical to mask other parts of their life that they are looking to avoid. So it's really easy for an extreme guy to say, you know what, I don't have to deal with what's going on in my marriage. I'm not going to talk about the hard shit, where this guy over here might be extremely vulnerable. Like that's what he wants. Right. And talk, to that point, you have to meet men where they are, but they also have to meet you where you are. So whatever program that is out there, you never go down, you have people come up, right? But
Right.
I'm a team guy at the end of the day. So taking in Psalm what we do, because we might be dealing with a 65-year-old doctor who has a bad back, bad knees, bad hips, right? And we need to make sure that he's at least moving. His hard is his definition of hard, right? And putting those milestones and or those big missions in front of him that make him feel good, help him shed old layers, and help him become healthy and get younger while everybody else at his age are getting older is so key. But what we're going to use that guy for in the best way possible is all that experience, his ability to be vulnerable, and his strength, if you will, to help the Mr. Extreme over here, guys like me, to embrace the vulnerability, to embrace the mindset and the impact, to help these guys slow down. That's the key. Help these guys slow down. And I can give name after name after name and Psalm on both sides because we have them both. And so what we've built over 5 years is honestly like it's a organization that's like for professional athletes. And because physical is such a big domain, it's not the only domain. I totally get it. But between our fuel program, our nutrition, sleep, recovery, hormone program, we are just indoctrinating guys on the side that really don't usually move their body to at least become more healthy, more vital, more durable, more endurable. And then ultimately through time, it upgrades their mindset. And then guys over here, it's really helping them heal the heart more than anything. That's the way I see it, right? Because we all have to walk together and we all have to build off of each other's strengths. It would be insane to think that just one group alone, the extremes, know it all. They don't. And it's typically we're running from something or towards something, and we're typically masking something, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome that you've got both, and it makes for a more dynamic and rich community ultimately. Yeah, something else in there to springboard off of Kokoro, I want to ask you as these kind of events, they're like a metaphor for life, right? You experience things that relate back. So I know I've heard stories about a lot of people dropping out of an event like Kokoro in moments like the Mount Palomar hike, where it's, I believe, usually at night. They say, hey, no talking, you're going to be in silence, right? So you're in the dark, literally and figuratively. You're silent, you're in your own head. Or, you and I were talking a little bit off air about the 75-hour modern day night project I did. My hardest moment was when one of the evolutions had stopped and we got a little bit of downtime, and that was the same experience, right? Dark, quiet, in my own head. And going back to sort of the metaphor for life, and I know you often talk about men living in sort of quiet desperation, that darkness. You even mentioned it sounds like you had a buddy, Jake, who maybe committed suicide. I know an unfortunate number who've gone the same path, right? So what is it about men that want to live this type of desperation, kind of end up doing this lone wolf thing, but it's in that solitude, that darkness, that quiet that is the hardest for us?
Great question. I think it's because it's the easy path. It's the path of self-preservation, if you will. The woe is me victimization mindset is a very toxic mindset. And I give an example. So class 6, Caleb Carpenter School of Man, he lost his father. And this is public, so it's no big, I talk about him all the time, and he's like a little brother to me now. He lost his father due to cancer. And this is going to be a very good example and a very good answer to your question. This is the power behind Psalm, because it's such a, you don't just show up for Kokoro and then you're done. Some is an ongoing what's next program. Hopefully I'm making sense there. So
Yeah.
the brotherhood is a
Okay.
very tight knit community. So Caleb goes through class 6, freshman phase, goes through Crucible 12, which is 12 hours, 20. Then he goes through 24. Then he goes through 55. The one thing we dealt with Caleb, because you get to know each other so intimately well, is his anger. And one mission, 1 month, and we have men across the country doing this, but he was in Little Rock. He was the team leader, and you earn a warrior box every month in Psalm, but it's earned. It's not ever given. Nothing's given. But I was their head instructor, and we rotated instructors, and basically I kept failing them, and they had to do, and it was purpose to see how one would respond. Life is a test. Your grade is your response, right? And then we unpack it, and then we assimilate life principles and teachings, etc. But we kept seeing a theme out of Caleb: anger, anger, anger. And his dad, the year prior, passed away, and his dad dealt with cancer, terminal cancer. But that was Caleb's mission, taking him to the VA, tending to him, caring for him, etc. So he goes through all this, and this is why I said that you can't Amazon Prime Life, right? We go through all of this. He goes through a split with his fiance. They had just had a child. This dynamic, and Caleb's a very go-getting type of cat, but he suppressed it. He held it all in, even with the anger. I saw him kick a trash can across HQ one time. So what do you think we do? That's exactly where I don't go and yell at anybody. We don't do that. It becomes very much a coaching opportunity at that point, but he's the only one that can do anything with it. Fast forward 18 months and he tries to take his life. He takes 32 of his dad's morphine pills that his dad was taking during treatment. His life wasn't worth living anymore. Very successful pharmaceutical rep. His fiance moved with the kids to West Virginia. He goes in desperation. He goes just silent, ghost, which we see it because we got such a tight-knit network. We don't have thousands upon thousands of guys in there. And you go through class and you build real brotherhood. And so you start to understand when guys start pulling back and why they're pulling back, etc. And he ends up taking 33 morphine pills. I'm headed out 0 dark 30 to meet some of the guys, and he wouldn't answer his phone. I ended up finding him face down in the throw up, for just to shorten the story. All right. We had, at that point, we have a guardian unit through our 501c, the School of Man Foundation, that we deployed, started taking care of stuff at the house and getting him into rehab and all that good stuff. And he made a very profound statement, very, very profound statement that I don't think a lot of us really necessarily take into account when a guy goes to lone wolf mode, self-preservation mode. And it goes back to the victimization, the woe is me. It's the story that he started telling himself. Mm-hmm. He said, I don't want to bring any of this to anybody's doorstep anymore. I don't want to bother anybody. People are too busy for me to talk about this, right? He got so caught up in his depression. He got so caught up in his internal story that little by little by little, he started to retract and recluse back into the darkness. I'm so embarrassed to even bring this to you, Cole, which I don't foster that type of environment, but we start developing these stories inside of our minds that create the isolation mode. It's not like we choose overnight. It's not like someone wakes up and says, you know what, today I'm just going to end this shit. It's little by little, like little paper cuts, that we make a decision to slowly but surely isolate. I don't need this anymore, right? I'm good. I've got this under control. And he started he never dealt with the source. He never dealt with his dad's death. He never dealt with the trauma that he's experienced, right? Even though we worked through all that with the SOM, but he never dealt with it head on. So little by little, he started taking himself out of the game. Doesn't just happen overnight. And it becomes where that story starts. And for him, I found him face down in that throw up. And it took something like that to completely create a paradigm shift in his life, because he came back, he's alive, he's doing so well today, right? And that's where I feel men start. It's like you show up one day from work and you drink a beer, and then the 6 weeks from now you drink 6 beers. It's little by little by little, and you start walking past the mirror and you see your gut getting bigger, and you start shaming yourself, you start talking shit to yourself, you start pulling yourself out. Oh, there's no way, what's the point, it's too hard, it's, all the bullshit excuses, which are lies. And that's where lone wolf happens. And then some couples, wives included, like that, meaning like they don't want you outpacing them. There's a truth in that. We've seen that in some. Like, he's going to leave me because he's done this same thing the same way for so long, and now all of a sudden he's around a bunch of men that are really living and not existing, and expecting him to do the same thing. No, baby, come on back. Let me put this upper limit on.
Right.
That's where I know that's a long answer, but I'm just going off of a story, that's in our book, School of Man, the book that we all wrote together. That right there, same thing with Doug Powell, but he did the hardest thing any man could do. He raised his hand. He's a number 9 pilot in Southwest Airlines. Gets a divorce after 20 years. Albany, Georgia. One of my best friends, 61 years old. Took him 3 times to complete our 55-hour crucible. Gets a divorce and says, I'm ready. I'm done. He's such in a dark spot, but he made a call. I flew over, spent a few days with him, but then he made the decision. He said, I'm not living like this. He started filtering back, what will make the boat go faster? Why is this happening for me versus to me? And then once we started shifting some mindset, things started to unlock for him. And he became that much more closer to his grandchildren that he didn't have a relationship with at the time, and even his daughters that were estranged.
Those are 2 great examples. And you mentioned the book, so let me just ask about that before we run out of time. And I want to make sure we wrap up on where people can learn more about School of Man and you and your team. But you mentioned the book, School of Man, A Man's Guide to Living, Loving, and Legacy. You mentioned your daughter briefly. I believe you have a son as well, Landon.
I do, Landon.
So it's hard enough work to fix ourselves. So as a father, and you mentioned legacy, talk a little bit about how your intentionality as a father and how you set Landon up for success, maybe in ways that you didn't have.
Vulnerability. He gets to see his dad my dad grew up without a dad. My dad grew up dirt poor, Western Oklahoma, on the oil rigs. Now, he eventually had a relationship with my grandfather, which was great, but my dad never made an excuse. No one ever came to my dad's wrestling matches, football games, track meets, or anything like that. My dad he's my hero. But I also saw that my dad every afternoon, after getting home from work, would go to sleep on the couch, would smoke, eat poorly, and golf was his exercise. I just did not, he and I talk about that to this day, but he's still married to my mother. My mother's battling stage 3, stage 4 ovarian cancer. Worships the ground that she walks on, right? But I never saw my dad be vulnerable with me. Never saw it in a also public setting with other men. I grew up with some on my dad's side and both my mom's side, I would say outdated masculinity, if you will.
Right.
Not toxic. That's a bullshit term. So showing Landon, because Landon's he's autistic. We don't let we define him like that. He's on the autism spectrum, has ADHD, has battled depression himself and anxiety. Learned that all in January. It was a really, really interesting and challenging time for my family. And I think that's a very important note to make. Ashley and I would not be together if we hadn't dealt with everything that we had dealt with prior. It would have broke us, because between my father-in-law being in Duke Hospital for almost 2 months, my mother battling stage 3 ovarian cancer on treatment number 25, my older sister being stage 4 cancer right now too. I mean, guys, you're going to get knocks at the door, and you're going to fight how you train. That's the other thing. You're going to fight how you fucking train, but you can't suppress it. I remember screaming in a box that week, the same week our 17-year-old dog died. Landon gets diagnosed with autism, right? I remember being in my garage doing power cleans, and I grabbed a box and screamed in a box. But in Psalm, I get to take it, I get to take it to, I get to use it as platforms to teach and to grow. We're very, very in tune with the emotional side of things at Psalm. And I lead from the front in that regards. He gets to see that. He also gets to see how I train. He also gets to see how I treat his mother. He also gets to see how I lead my men. He also gets to see how daddy becomes vulnerable and daddy cries. He also gets to hear the conversations that I have on the baseball fields, off the baseball fields, in the classroom, out of the classroom. He gets to see how I operate. Not perfect. I'm perfectly flawed. And I talk about that all the time. I'm a very open book. I talk about failing out of 7th grade to getting kicked off the baseball team with him. I don't hide any of that shit. My wife and I don't. We don't let him label, define himself by his label. I'll kind of end on this. We watched Top Gun Maverick, which I loved. And it was him and I, and he said, Dad, and we walked out, and he loved it very, very much. He said, Dad, I want to be the hero. And I looked at him, and he was on this high right now for the movie. And remember, that's cinema. And I said, son, you have the choice to be Top Gun. He said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, you're the voice for the voiceless. God gave you a voice for other autistic children that cannot speak. I said, that's hero shit right there. I didn't say shit, but I said, that's hero. That's what being a hero means, and you actively choosing it, boy. I said, if you want to be the hero, own your story first, like we always talk about, and then start speaking for these kids that cannot speak. How you play on the baseball field, how you act, how you operate. That's what heroes are made of. So those are the things that I'm doing my best to impart on him.
Yeah, I love the perfectly flawed, and I love how you're leading, brother. And I know you're going to set Landon up to be that hero and be that leader as well. So I appreciate that. Hey, just let's wrap up on School of Man. Obviously, the book is out there, which is an entry point. But in terms of guys who may get through the book and want to reach out and do more, or go straight to what you're doing with your training, your development, your events, your brotherhood, is this a local thing? Is it virtual? Just tell me where to find that and how it all works.
Yeah, go to schoolofman.live. That's the best place to start, and take our battle guide challenge. It doesn't cost you a dime. It's going to help you use the rifle approach versus the shotgun approach as a man. I think a lot of us want to use the shotgun approach in life when we need to be doubling down on our one thing. So that's why we call it a rifle approach, and helping you hit that target from 1,000 yards out, no matter how bad the wind is or the weather. So that's what the battle guide is. That's a good entry point, right, and getting connected. And then if you want to enroll in the School of Man, it is a work at your own pace program, along with other men that will be in your class. It's similar to what we've come to know, whether it be in sports or in school. You've got freshman phase, sophomore phase, junior phase, senior phase. All right. Don't get consumed with all that, but each phase has a specific mission to help you better yourself as a man. You do have to complete those phases in order to be eligible for our crucible. And it's something that has been built off of my life, at the end of the day, as well as other men's life who have dedicated their life to bettering men. And this is why God put them on the earth. But go to schoolman.live, get involved. That's just the best way I can say it. And at the end of the day, man, Psalm doesn't produce Teslas, just like modern day Night doesn't, and Silfit doesn't. We are what make up Psalm. We are what make up, what these organizations stand for. I'm a very much believer of we the people, right? So when you get involved, come in, make it better, and just help us put it in the universe.
Good stuff, man. I love it. I love where you guys are headed. 5 years in, but long way to go. Look forward to seeing it. We'll definitely get links up to the website, to the book. And then, as you said, the battle guide, and then the entry point to the program, man. So Cole, I super appreciate the time today, and we can go on and on. You are, you're dynamic, but it's amazing how open you are. So in that openness, I know we could have a lot more to discuss. We'll do it again another time, I hope. But I appreciate the time you gave us today. Dropped some great stuff in there. So thank you again.
Yeah. Extremely grateful. Extremely grateful. Thank you so much.
All right, brother. Grateful to you too. Have an amazing weekend. Enjoy the family and the beach.
All right, man. Will do.
All right, guys. I will keep it short here on the back end. Thank you again to Cole Rodgers, episode 115, Living the Standard, Cole Rodgers' School of Man. So hopefully that inspired some of you guys, resonated with some of you guys. And if so, please reach out to Cole, schoolofman.live, or catch him on social media, message him, reach out to him directly. Of course, all the episodes and the show notes for this one are up on the website, men2mastery.com/115. That's episode 115. men2mastery.com/115. Please reach out, check out what Cole has going on at schoolofman.live. And most importantly, whatever your path is, whatever your approach is, whatever your tribe is, if you will, this one, School of Man, your own thing, or someone else, just find it and do it, right? There's no magic. It is all about the daily grind, the daily consistency. Sometimes it's easy. Most of the time it's not. You just got to get out there and keep grinding and get after it. So do that, guys. And next episode coming up, Mickey Shook, Carry Trainer.